Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to urge your strong opposition to House Bill 614. And there is ultimately a balance in what government ought to do and what we allow them to do. And at the end of the day, the only thing that stands between an intrusive, long, overreaching arm of government and our citizens is our ability to stand up and say there is a role and a responsibility for individuals, and there is a role and responsibility for government. And very often we consider bills where there's a balance between the two, and one of them grows at the expense of the other. In this bill, we are setting up a government bureaucracy to monitor what medications you take. A bureaucrat is authorized to contract to a private vendor who on a weekly basis has to submit back to that bureaucrat exactly what prescription medications you get filled. If a doctor prescribes you a medication for an off-label use, the government will know it. If a doctor prescribes you some medicine for a condition that you need treatment for, a government bureaucrat will be looking over your shoulder. It is not that far different than what George Orwell wrote about. It is an incremental loss of liberty from a very, very well-intentioned group of people who believe that government knows better than you do about the relationship between you and your doctor and you and your pharmacist. In the bill, line 114, every dispenser has 1 week to submit a report back to the government. On line 139, the agency, the bureaucrat, reviews the information and makes a determination about whether he or she believes there is reasonable cause to believe a violation of the law has occurred or a breach of professional conduct. And then, at the end of the bill, it's very clear that there is no penalty whatsoever for that same government bureaucrat or the private vendor from negligently or recklessly releasing that information to the public. They can only be prosecuted if they willfully and intentionally do that. I really believe this type of arrangement it inserts government between a patient and his or her physician. And in this case, frankly, also between a patient and his pharmacist. It's like we are children, monitored and controlled by a government that knows better than us and better than our doctors what is in our best interest. Even the American Cancer Society says that when you monitor prescriptions, it has a chilling effect on healthcare professionals prescribing needed pain medication. You have not only patients now that are concerned about whether a bureaucrat might be comparing what they got filled last month with what they got filled this month, but you also have the physician or the nurse practitioner wondering if the prescription for pain medication for this particular patient who has cancer, an incredibly difficult pain to deal with, they'll be worried about whether or not the government that's monitoring them will bring the axe down on their head too. The U.S. Justice Department looked at this and said, yes, there's an initial amount of money, but it may cost the state $1 million a year to regulate this program. And today, as we sit here today, law enforcement, for all of the good that they do to keep us safe, cannot come in and search your house without reasonable cause. They cannot go out there and open your car up and look through it without some articulable suspicion of something that might be there. And they cannot go into your medical records or your prescription records without some court order or search warrant. There's a very good reason for that, and that is that we have a reasonable expectation of privacy for our medical records and the relationship between us and our physician. We have a due process right that the Georgia Supreme Court has recognized in a case called King versus State that says that a patient's medical records are a fundamental right of privacy, and that government should not be able to use investigative subpoenas to search through our private medical records or prescription records without a search warrant or a court order. Ultimately, this is a fundamental right that we're talking about, and we run the risk today of creating a chilling effect, as the American Cancer Society says, on physicians that are prescribing needed pain medication to patients that have cancer. Members of the Senate, we are, at the end of the day, the guardians of liberty for our citizens. And good intentions from all sorts of perspectives, whether we should eat better, live better, smoke differently, buckle up, those good intentions can ultimately lead to a loss of our liberty from a paternalistic government that we have handed over our individual responsibility for, and we now say, we not only ask you to take care of us and watch after us, but we're going to be dependent upon you to make sure that we live right, act right, and punish us if we step out of line. This is a well-intentioned bill. There are abuses in this area. But don't cede the authority of government. Don't cede the authority of government to make sure they have reasonable cause to go through what is otherwise a private issue between you and your patient, you and your doctor, just because you believe that a government bureaucrat knows better about what drugs you should be taking. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I will yield the well.